Hello, welcome to the video on partial arrays. So what do I mean by partial arrays? So I'm going to draw you a little picture here. So say for example, I declare an array that I'm going to store the grades, the GPAs of all of the students in my class. So say I declare this array to be size 10. So what that means is I have the capability of having this array like this, and I can store, the name of it is GPA, and I can store 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I can store in this array, this would be, just to refresh, this is GPA at index 0 all the way up. This one would be GPA at index 5. So if you don't understand that, go back. Each one of these is a double. The array itself is named GPA. I have the capability of storing 10 GPAs in this array. But what a partial array means that I'm not going to use all 10. Maybe I'm only going to use 6 one time. And maybe another time I use this array, I'm only going to use 8. So a partial array just means that I'm only going to use part of that array in my program. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, sometimes you don't know ahead of time how many GPAs you want to put in. And maybe I wanted to use the same program for all of my classes, and in some classes I had 5 students, and in some classes I had 7 students. Again, I'm just making the scale very small. Of course, I have a lot more students than that. And so each time I use this GPA array, it might have a different amount. So all I want to do is make sure that it is the biggest I will need. So I want to make sure that I declare it to be the biggest that I will need. Now some of you might say, well, we can use dynamic memory allocation. And yes, you can, but that's a more advanced concept, and we will be talking about that later. So right now we are just going to make arrays that are the biggest that we will need, or a little bit bigger than that, even larger than you will need. And we will just use a part of that array. So how do we manage that? We manage that by every time you declare an array, you declare a count that keeps track of how many items are actually in that array. So what does this count mean? This count is not the same as the potential. This is the potential. I have the potential to put 10 elements in my array. The count is actually how many have value. And at this point, none of them have value because then I haven't assigned any values in there. So right now, my count is 0 because all of my values are, I don't know what they have. Now, if I were to use, like here, I said I'm using 8 elements, then my count would be 8. And in this example, if I'm using 6 elements, then my count would be 6. So it depends how many elements I'm actually using of that array with the potential. So just keep in mind that in this class, we will declare arrays larger than what we need. Declare larger, or at least the biggest than what you need, and we will declare a count to go along with it. So let me just give you an example of how this would work. So let's go back to my array. I have an array of data type double. The name of the array is GPA, and the potential is to store 10 elements. So then I have a count. To put my data type first, I have an integer count, and this integer is going to keep track of how many elements actually have values. So when I start out, I have not initialized or assigned any values. So what I'm going to do for my example is I'm going to have the user tell me what the count is, and then I'm going to write a loop to fill that in. So let's go over here and draw the array, very small down here so I can fit the code. And this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, let's see, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I always make them very 9. Okay, so this is my array. The name of my array is GPA. And so let's demonstrate how I would get this from the user. So the way that I would get this from the user is I would ask the user to enter how many. Now if my max size is 10, I'm going to say how many and tell the user that the maximum they can put in is 10. Of course, later on, as you learn to program more, you will learn how to force correct input. Now we will assume that the user will give us correct input. So I will scan in, and I will scan into that variable called count. So once the user gives me the count, let's say for example the user gives me the number 4. 4 is the count. So this, it's going to put, I'm going to partially use this array at indexes 0, 1, 2, and 3. 4 is the count, so that's outside of past, that's the one element past my count. As you can see, I have 4, 0, 1, 2, 3. And 3 is going to be count minus 1. Now if another time the user enters a 7, 7 would be the count and 6 would be count minus 1. So how do I use this? Well, I will declare an integer I up here, and I will write a loop and scan in and fill in the GPAs into the 4 first elements of the array. So I would start for I equals 0, I less than count, because you want to go 1 less than count, you want to go 0 to 3. This is the same loop that you use for arrays, how to go through an array. Then I would just prompt and ask the user, printf, enter a GPA, and scanf into, now the GPA is data type double, so I need to use data type double, and I'm going to go into an element in my array, and I will get the yellow, and we will go through this. So we start out and we say how many, maximum is 10, so then the user enters the number 4, so now count is going to be 4 because that's what the user entered. So we're going to start where I equals 0. We're going to check, is 0 less than 4? Yes, it is. So then we say enter a GPA. So the GPA is going to go into GPA array at index 0 right here. So they enter 3.2. Then you do I++. That's going to change the I from a 0 to a 1. You check, is 1 less than 4? Yes, it is. So now we're going to change this to a 1. So we're going to scan in to GPA at index 1, which is right here. And they're going to enter a 4.0. Then this is going to change. It's going to go I++. Going to change the I to a 2. See why I picked a small number? Is 2 less than 4? Yes, it is. Enter the GPA into index 2. So we enter here 3.2. We do I++. This is a 3. Is 3 less than 4? Yes, it is. We scan in. Index 3. Okay, now we change this to a 4. So it hits this condition. Is the test now is 4 less than 4? That is not true. So because that is not true, then it's going to go to the end of the loop body and proceed to do whatever instructions are down here after the loop. And in this case, I don't have any additional instructions after the loop, but it would continue on. So now I have succeeded in filling up my array partially with the potential to put 10 GPAs in it, but because the user said they only wanted to put 4, I'm only putting 4. So I hope that helps you to understand. This count is very important. So just to review, every time that you declare an array, like a double scores, which could be size 200, you want to also declare an integer to go along with it. Score count. And each time you add an element into your scores array, you add a number to that. Or if I had an integer array that's storing numbers of size 50, I want to also have an integer that's keeping track of the number count. Again, at this point it would be initialized to 0, but if I added elements in it, I would change it. So for example, if right here I had the potential to store 50 numbers, but I put in 6, 2, 3, 1, 4, 2, 1. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers in there, then my account would be 6. If I added another number in there, so if my count is 6, and I wanted to add another number into numbers, then I could go to numbers at index num count. Whoops. Because it's a 6, add another number in there, and then I would have to add one to num count plus plus. So what did I just do here? Well, let's draw a little picture over here. So this is my array. The name of it is numbers. So let's just go through here. So I have an array called numbers. Its potential to hold 50 elements, so it would go all the way up to 49. This is index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4, index 5, index 6, index 7, index 8, and it could go all the way up to index 49. So this declaration, size 50, I put 6 numbers in there. I put a 2 here. These are the values. A 1, well, that's not good. A 1 here, a 4 here, and a 2 here. So then I set, and a 1 here. So then I set the count. The num count is 6 because there are 6 items in my array. So I set the num count to 6. And then if you look here, my array called numbers at index num count, which is this one right here, I add a 3. So then I want to take my num count and I change it from a 6 to a 7. That way this num count is keeping track of the first empty spot in my array. And this will one time soon become important to understand. So hopefully this helps you to understand a little more about partial arrays. It gives you the opportunity to reuse arrays for different amounts of data.